I'm Olivia Terenzio with OpenTable. Thanks for your patience in getting started. We're waiting on one more panelist who's running a little bit late, but she's going to jump in and join us once she's here. So excited to be here at Journey today. To give a little background about the conversation that will be going on, we recently at OpenTable released an entire guide on how to open a restaurant. Worked with Allison here, and she tapped into our incredible network of restaurateurs to share tips and best practices about everything from writing a business plan to fundraising to hiring and training a team. So really trying to cover every single aspect of the process. And I'm so excited to be here today to continue the conversation with these incredible panelists. On the end, we have John Winterman. Worked about 17 years front of house for restaurateurs like Charlie Trotter, Gary Danko, and Danielle Balloon. Recently made her D at Restaurant Danielle, and then he teamed up with Drew McPorrent to open Batard here in New York. So now he is the managing partner at Batard. And Allison, who's been a partner on this project, is the founder of Salt and Grow, a hospitality consulting company. She's opened something like 16 restaurants to date, and also worked at Dynex for a number of years, so has some incredible experience there. And Anthony Rudolph, finally, founder of Journey, so excited to be here with you today. Thanks for being part of the conversation. Worked at Jean George and also Thomas Keller Restaurant Group recently at Per Se. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, to get the conversation started. As I just mentioned, you all worked for some incredible people in the industry. Thomas Keller, Danielle Balloon, before starting your own businesses. Curious, how did that experience prepare you to go out on your own? Or what are some of the most important things you learned? Let's start with Anthony.
How's everybody doing today?
Great.
Thanks for coming out in this weather. It's nice winter weather. I think there's a lot, right? There's this industry or this profession is really based upon learning through immersion, sink or swim. You take the job, you learn very much on the field. There's very little prep work. Schools give you a very broad base of understanding, so I think you can make clear decisions, but the majority of what you learn is on the job. So obviously the best people that you can work around, the better ideas, practices, skills, and habits that you can steal from them. And then make them your own, and then thus perform. So, having been able to work for not just Thomas Keller and Jean George, but the people that they hire and surround themselves with. I think from Chef Keller, the greatest thing is really clarifying language and framing your mind around. He is a perfectionist on all levels, but he's also incredibly thoughtful and caring. And he is very clear not just on how he wants something cut or the way he wants his kitchen designed, but also the language that he uses, which I think is very important in starting your own business. Ultimately figuring out what is important to you, because the business is going to be an extension of yourself. Right? It should be, I don't think anybody wants to build something that they don't feel represents who they are as a human. And so really clarifying what you believe in and what you stand for, so that you can build something with integrity, is one thing. The French Laundry and Per Se and Bouchon Bakery and Ad Hoc are all extensions of Chef Keller. There's very little things, if any, that he does that don't resonate with who he is as a person. I think that's one. And I think the other thing with language with him that I think has been most impactful for me is, your language frames your thoughts, and your thoughts frame your actions. And ultimately that is what happens when you're opening a business. Because you're going to be hit with, say I left Chef Keller in April 2013. I launched Journey July of last year, and I thought it was going to be like an 8-month, this is what it's going to take to open, everybody's going to throw gobs of money at me, and this is the greatest idea in the world, this is my baby, how could anybody not like it? Nobody wants to tell anybody your baby is ugly, even though some babies are ugly. And, so you have this vision going out, and you're going to be hit with a million different decisions and a million different pitfalls. And I just think it's framing your language and what you believe in is so critical, because that's what's going to be the deciding factor when you're really under the gun of making a decision, whether it be around, and we'll talk about raising money and investors and partners, or location, or what compromises you're going to make, which you're going to have to make. So I think from Chef Keller, that was probably the thing that resonated with me the most. He's an absolute perfectionist. I'm not. You know, I'm okay with flying by the seat of my pants a little bit, and also letting some things slide if they're not a high priority. So I definitely didn't get that from him. But the thoughtfulness and the really being clear and having a much bigger picture of what you're trying to accomplish on a day-to-day basis is probably the most impactful thing that I took from him.
Yeah. What about you two? Anything you would add?
You know, from Danielle, he had a clear structure and clear point of view. I think within that, he allowed his staff to give them room for spontaneity. Yes, if you think of the structure of a sonnet, if you think of the structure of a sonnet, it's this strict rhyming pattern, it's a strict scheme, but you can do whatever you want within that pattern. And I think Danielle is very open with that. The one thing I want to talk about with Danielle and Charlie and Gary were the spirit of generosity. And it's not just handing out a free glass of champagne or copying food, because we're in the business of hospitality, but we're in a business as well. It's really more generosity with time. And there were, you know, I watched Danielle sit down with anybody on the staff and take the time to listen. And maybe his BlackBerry is going off when he had one, and maybe he has a meeting he's late to, and he's always overscheduled. But he always was able to take the time with his staff and his people and listen first, and then respond with a series of intelligent questions. And you know, it's something I try to carry over to Qatar. We have a structure in place. We have standards that are met. We do give the staff the freedom. We don't script them in what they say to the table. On occasion, it goes back to haunt me a little bit, but you know, I'd rather have somebody on the floor with drive and personality than with a structured script pattern. You know, and I try to keep open with the staff and keep generous with them, and try to take that spirit to Danielle. I mean, what can I say? He does more than like two people do. So if there were two Danielles, it'd be like he's doing enough for six, you know, and that can't be lost. So just to live up a little bit to that is what I'm trying to push myself to.
And you two worked for Chef Danielle as well. Is that something you found?
Totally, absolutely. Especially with generosity of time and spirit. I mean, I think that's one of the things to this day that I still appreciate most about Danielle. You know, at any given moment, years after I've left his organization, if I call him or send him a message or an email and say, "Hey, chef, I need to talk," or whatever, he's always there, and it's amazing in person with him. You know, kind of the scenarios that John was describing with his phone going off and a million meetings happening. Like when Danielle is speaking to you, he's really speaking to you. He's very engaged in whatever the conversation is, and it's impactful. I mean, that's a huge thing to take away from working for someone like that. The other big one for me was just never settling for no. And with guests and, you know, our fellow coworkers, that was all about hospitality, making sure that we were taking care of each other and taking care of our guests for sure. And in business, it was just, if you were going to come to the table and say no to Danielle, you needed to have a whole lot of really, really exceptional reasons. And his creativity in getting around no it just continues to impress me. I mean, I think back on doing the opening of DBGB, and I don't know how this happened, but relatively late in the design process, we found out that we were only allowed to have a certain number of bar stools. And if any of you have been to
two-seaters,
if any of you have been to DBGB, it's a huge bar. I mean, it's big, it's long, and I think that we were only allowed to have like 8 stools or something like that. And so Danielle was like, okay, just make them all 4 feet long. And that's why all of the bar stools and all of the DBGB properties are now like love seat style bar stools. He was like, okay, if we can only have 8, then they're just all going to seat 2 people, or 3 if you're really creative. And that, you know, in my business now and in everything I do, I always think about that. If I feel like I'm running into no, or I can't find a solution, I just keep taking myself back to the drawing board to look at it a different way, or to get advice from somebody else about another way of approaching it, because in Danielle's world, there is no.
Well, I'd love to, John, you just kind of touched on this a little bit, but although a lot of restaurant projects start with passion, it is, at the end of the day, a business. And I'd love to hear kind of about certain decisions you made when you were getting your businesses started, with profitability, efficiency, some of these kind of more practical aspects in mind. Georgette, anything come to mind?
Efficiencies, yes, and I can't help myself but I just take a step back, and I hope that's all right. They've already just addressing the world of Daniel Boulou. There's no such thing as no, and I think just something to add about his generosity, whether with staff or with clients or even his purveyors. And you think, well, he's their customer, but no, he'd be generous with his purveyors. And I don't think he ever calculated it, but something, because that's not his nature, that's the whole point, but something that I took away from that. I think we all had to be generous people to work for him, or we wouldn't have been with him for so many years. Something I took away from that, as if there's a lesson, that your business would never suffer or lose by being overly generous. He could never give enough. And sometimes he would give so much, you'd think, like, oh my God, this is going to cost us so much money. How are we going to do this? Or figure it out, it won't be profitable. But that wasn't the calculation. And at the end of the day, giving more, and the no, it's so hard for me to say I, because I was so in a world of we, and still in a world of we. Started our business, opened our restaurant with the idea that the answer to every question would be yes. And it starts from at the reservations, and that's a Daniel Boulou. We may not have that 7 o'clock table, but we always start to the guest. Yes, absolutely, we have a table. Can we arrange something for you at 6:45 or at 8:15? How can we take care of you? Anyway, so sorry about the diverting back to world of Daniel Boulou, because of course he's been such a huge influence. But coming back to the business decisions, and there's maybe where I may divert a little bit from the life and business lessons from the world of Daniel Boulou, because there's so many things that a chef-driven restaurant, even though I started as a cook, a chef would want to do that, maybe a non, because I've been a cook, but I wouldn't call myself a chef, might not do in their restaurant, and these may be things that have an effect on profit cost and profitability. So these are small details, but I think they have an influence in the long run. So, for example, in our restaurant, our plateware is very simple. It's what's called buffalo china. It's the most heavy-duty. I don't think we've broken more than 10 plates in 3.5 years. It's gotten to the point where the glaze is wearing away before the plates have broken. That's how crazy durable it is. And of course, we're not the 3 Michelin star. We're a very everyday, comfortable, accessible sort of experience. But so it would never be appropriate, and it would so not be cost effective in our restaurant to have, say, a very fine, I won't mention any brand names, French porcelain, and to have our name well, that's another thing, to have it would cost 3 or 4 times more to have your name or your logo, the name of your restaurant on the plate. But I come back to the decision-making process for me is, will that thing that you're going to spend money on actually give a better dinner, a more comfortable experience, a more delicious meal, more comfort? And if that thing that you might be spending money on does not actually make the guests' dinner any better, more comfortable, more delicious, more memorable in some way. So there's a little example that might, a chef-driven restaurant might do it differently, but so our plates don't have names or logos, and they're not a fancy French brand, but does the food taste as good? Absolutely. And did we spend, perhaps 70% less than you might on another item so I just keep in mind, is that thing that you're going to spend money on, is it for somebody's ego, or is it actually going to enhance the guest? Will it affect the guest or make your staff, enable them to do their jobs better and make them more comfortable at the end of the day? So another decision like that, but it was certainly not a purely dollars and cents decision. Our restaurant is very purposely a no tablecloth restaurant. We wanted in many ways, in every way, to convey this sort of high and low contrast, super high quality ingredients, very careful preparation, super customer friendly, service oriented, but without a lot of these sort of fuss around the edges. So, and we wanted to convey that physically as well. So to me, the idea that you're a no tablecloth restaurant sends a certain message. This is not going to be fussy. I can go in there in blue jeans or black tie, but either way, I'll be, welcome and it will be accessible. But at the end of the day, does not having tablecloths make, affect our bottom line? Absolutely. Allison can give you more dollars and cents on the cost of linens and dealing with New York City restaurant linen companies. That said, where do I make it? I'm very, very quality conscious and very, very sensitive actually to the quality of linens, and it makes me cringe to touch anything that's synthetic. I actually sorry. This must be inherited. My father, anything that he would sit down on in a public place, he would touch it first, and if he thought it might be synthetic, he would ask for a piece of cotton cloth and put it down and sit down. It would be so embarrassing to go to restaurants with him. He would ask for a cotton napkin to sit down on, and he was afraid the seat was in any way synthetic. But so it's left its mark. So we have super fine quality cotton napkins. I would hate for my guest, and if I don't want to touch it myself, I don't want my guest to touch it. So anyway, there are just a few tiny examples of business decisions that affect the bottom line, but that they have to be in line with the overall image and comfort and quality of what you're offering your guest. I hope that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious too. So, not tablecloths and not fine china.
Right.
Where did you splurge that you felt like was going to make an impact on the guest?
Oh yes, absolutely. Actually, we have beautiful silver because that's also the guest touches that, and it's heavy. Antique. It's silver-plated nickel. It was collected by a silver dealer in London who collected it all over the UK for me. They're all of a similar pattern, what's called a fiddlehead pattern, which means there's a long narrow shaft and then a kind of like the head of a fiddle at the bottom. So they have du poids. There's weight in your hand. You're really lifting a real fork. They're beautiful. They have a nice patina. They're all used. They all have different monograms or coats of arms, or some have no particular monogram on them. So they're special. And if you're the sort of person who notices this, you'll notice that it's a very fine quality silver, and that time and effort went into finding it and collecting it. If you're the sort of person who doesn't notice it, you'll still be eating with a really nice fork. I suppose that's one example, but the quality of the ingredients, and some guests may notice it, others may not, but at the end of the day, I think that defines our restaurant. So whether it's our birds or our fish or our vegetables, we're, everyone says this about their restaurant, but we're buying the best stuff that you can buy, and that's where the money goes. Does it have to, should it go also into paying your team? Yes, if you're going to, everyone knows how competitive the market is today, and if you're going to attract and retain the best people, obviously money talks. I think there are other things that talk as well, so this may be diverting from your question. Another driving factor for us, and because we opened this restaurant as a little team, even if I'm the one here speaking about it, creating this workplace of tremendous respect and dignity, because if we start with respect and dignity for each other amongst ourselves as fellow employees, that of course the salary is what your employees are looking for, whether they're the head chef or a dishwasher. Actually, that was a driving factor. Respect for the stewards, which are essentially the dishwashers, that if you showed such respect for your dishwashers, and that everyone that was a standard for everyone in the business, that everyone would be well treated at the end of the day, because they're so often forgotten or maybe not recognized, and very important. So if you start with respect on that level, then you're probably going to go pretty far.
Let's talk about business plans, because every restaurant starts with a business plan, right? So what are investors looking for in a business plan, did you find? And what really makes you stand out or helps you get their attention? John, can we start with you?
That's a good question. I have no idea what they're looking for. They, we sat down with someone initially a few years back before we met Drew, and put together a business plan with somebody who had opened 17, 18 restaurants, not Allison. And we were as realistic as possible about what we thought our check average was going to be, and she helped us put together, based on real rents at the time and neighborhoods we were looking for. For me, the investors are looking for honesty, the ones that are kind of real. You can sit there and say it's going to be a $12 million restaurant, and it's going to get purchased by somebody. We're going to sell this and we're going to sell that and we're going to go to Vegas. And that may happen. You might get lucky. It may be a $12 million restaurant, but we had to be realistic in that if you bring somebody some honest numbers, you have to tell them you're going to be lucky to see your money back in 5 years. This is going to be, if you want to make the faster buck, put it into a fund. If you want to have a restaurant, then they need to have some money that they're going to kiss goodbye for a while. And if you get that back, what's the stat right now? 80% of the restaurants are closing after 5 years, before 5 years.
That sounds about right, yeah.
I couldn't.
Do you guys sleep at night?
Yes, very well actually. I have in Manhattan right before I go to bed. Marcus and I went through a number of people, probably 24, who were all gung ho about giving us money. Until it came time to write a check. And you start to separate who's going to talk and who's going to really do it. And sometimes you might get lucky and have like the 1 or 2 people who are going to give you all the money front. You might have to do, I think Gary opened 26 different individual smaller investors. But maybe it's a little bit more realistic to say, oh, I can lose $35,000 versus $500,000. Our business plan, it wasn't romantic. It wasn't, it didn't project any huge amount of sales, or it didn't project doing a chain after a certain amount of time. It didn't project any of that. It just projected realistic growth based on what the market was giving us at the time and what rents were at the time. And this is 2011 when we first put this together. A lot of people dropped off because we weren't making any promises. In fact, Drew and Marcus and I were looking at a space this past fall, and we just couldn't wrap our heads around how stupid the rent was. And they were making an assumption that it was literally going to be a $12 million restaurant out of the gate. And that would be great if it was, but you don't want to promise that. The one thing I can say I learned from Drew is you under-promise and over-deliver on the numbers. We did that at Batard. We under-promised with the investors. We said, this is what we can do. This is who we think is going to be here. You might open your doors and nobody shows up. Who knows? But you don't want to tell them it's going to be packed to the rafters every night. You want to be realistic on the numbers you can do. So we based it on 100 covers a night. I've done more. Obviously, my record's 178, but I'm not going to sit there and tell a room full of investors we're going to do 178 every night. So
Ongoing.
yeah.
So what was the selling point for Drew?
At one point, I was frustrated with the process of the back and forth and an attorney and an accountant and things like this. And when I talk to people now, they think, Jesus, it went really fast. It was like less than a month when we first met to when we signed a deal. For me, it felt like agonizing, like every day, like what is going on? Because I had to know what was going on for sure before I talked to Danielle and said, I'm moving on. And at one point, we met with Drew and I said, I just wish we could just shake hands and call it a day and go for it. And I think at that point, Drew thought that he was basically getting into bed with a couple of honest guys. And that's what Marcus and I were. We weren't necessarily worried about the dotted line. We're like, okay, we're all stand-up guys, as Charlie would say. We're just a blue-collar guy trying to make a living. And why can't we just shake hands and move on? I mean, legally you can't, but that's kind of where we were, and I think that kind of propelled things forward. So Drew might have a different take on that, but that's where we were.
Allison, I know you talk to people a lot about business plans. Anything you add? What were some of your biggest takeaways, I guess?
I think some of my biggest takeaways were, having the numbers right, and just as John said, making sure that they're not your best case scenario numbers, that they're pretty conservative. That was absolutely necessary. Making sure that all the information was in there, and you can find outlines for business plans all over the place that cover what you need to cover. But again, like investing in a restaurant is not, you don't do it because you're looking for a massive payback. You do it because you're in love with the process, or you want to feel like you're a part of something. And so the biggest thing that the investors I spoke with said they were looking for is connection to the project. They need to have some sort of emotional tie to what it is you're doing in order to be excited and willing to kiss their money goodbye for X number of years and potentially forever. The other thing that I thought was really interesting that I heard from most of the restaurateurs I spoke with on the investor front was being mindful of who your investors are. I think, you kind of commonly just think of, okay, anyone that'll write me a check, let's do it, I'll take it. And a lot of them had some negative experiences to share with just taking money from anyone, people who weren't necessarily aligned with them. And I thought that was an interesting perspective because you just don't hear that all that much. It is important to go into business with people that you trust and that you would be interested in hearing advice and feedback from. If you have a bunch of investors that you just fundamentally don't click with, those are the people that own a pretty large percentage of your business. So I think those were my two biggest.
I think that's really important. And I think there's a question that comes before the question of what do investors want. What do you want in a partner?
Right.
Right? Because this is your dream, it's your vision, you're looking for people to support you on it. What do you want them to look like? And you should have that going in to talking to people, because if they don't fit the mold of what you want, walk away. It's just money. It's just money. There's trillions and trillions of dollars available out there. There's really a lot of money out there. So are these the right people for you? It's no different than a marriage. And if you were looking for a spouse and your whole basis was, what do they want me to be? It's going to be a really miserable marriage. It's not going to last very long. But if you can actually say, what do I want my wife or my husband to look like what is that person, then you can actually go out and look for that. And I think that comes first. And then, maybe it's somebody with a ton of influence and you only need $5,000 from them, but you need their network. Or, it's honesty, integrity, character, and you define what it is that you want in your partner. And I went through this, and I almost lost to this game, but there's the game of there's a power dynamic where the money and the investor has the power. It's totally not true. It's a 50-50 choice, right? You can choose yes or no, they can choose yes or no in any situation. I walked away and lost during my funding process, $1.2 million. I only raised $750, but over the course of it, of walking away from 500, losing 500, and then having other people, pull out at the last minute, in total, it was a sum of $1.2 million.
Wow.
Right? And those are gut-wrenching nights to actually say, I know there's something not right about this person, and I have a decision to make. Do I want their money? And if yes, what does that mean for when you even promise 100 covers and you do 50? What is that conversation going to look like with the person if you can't see eye to eye and don't get along in this early stage? Because inevitably, there is no such thing in success that looks like this. It's always like a corkscrew, right? It's up and down, and hopefully you have more ups than downs. And in those down cycles, is that person going to be behind you then? Or are they going to be saying, this person's got to be up? And so I think it's important to understand as you're starting your business, it may take longer if you're over-selective, but in 10 years from now, what decisions will you have to make with this individual? And just making sure you actually have partners. And I think that language, going back to what I'm pretty particular on, is that it's like, are they investors or are they partners? What do you want? Because they're two different words, right? And I always look for partners. I want people who there's trust, there's character, there's integrity, and when shit hits the fan, they're going to be a partner to me, not somebody who's looking for something else.
Yeah. And in terms of do's and don'ts, that's definitely a good one. I know that you have current and aspiring restaurateurs here at Journey every day. What are some of the other big mistakes you see people make, or I guess common traps that people fall into?
Some of the most common ones are, I think, spot on for being realistic, and then even super conservative and low on revenue, and then super high on expenses. Even whenever I get into any supportive helping, I always drop in a 15% contingency, like a ridiculous amount, which on some projects could be a 7-figure number, but you have it, right? When you miss something, or inevitably a new expense comes, or Con Ed won't turn on your gas and they're not going to do it for another 6 months, you have a contingency there for all of those things. But I think the number one thing for food and beverage and restaurants in particular is undercapitalization, in particular for cash flow, right? You run your budgets, you run your numbers, and you figure out your build out, all of these costs that you can kind of hone in pretty closely on if you do your homework, which a lot of people don't do, but doing your homework, and then let's say you need $1 million, and then you just get around $1 million, and then you don't hit your revenue expectations, and your labor's over, and all your other expenses are high, and now you have no cash left, and you're done in 3 to 4 months.
Is that because people are thinking about the best case scenario and not the everyday?
We just want to get open,
Yeah,
but they don't think about staying open.
Right.
right.
Yeah, I think they're thinking about that. I think they're thinking about it's really hard to raise money. So do I need this extra $300,000? Right, when it's hard and it's painful, and I just want to get open.
We had one investor we created a little board of, if I jump in, a board of some of our investors, and she is hyper disciplined. She's a finance person who's been a restaurant investor for many decades on a very high level. And even though we knew we had raised enough to open our restaurant, she insisted, and wisely, this discipline was excellent, that we could not sign our lease until we were fully capitalized. And that number that we had set at being fully capitalized was far more than we needed to build and operate. And it gave us, we're fortunate that we didn't need that cushion, but it was nice when it was there, and we returned money to our investors. One, because we actually came in under budget, which is unthinkable, but I'm so damn frugal. I was going to say cheap, but I've learned to say frugal. So yes, and another thought on that, investors who partners and who will be with you through the tough times, but who bring other synergies to the table, and who will, whose business advice, even if they're not restaurateurs, they're not food or beverage people, whose business advice, and it's actually good that some of them are not restaurant people or food people, because they can see things a little bit more dispassionately and objectively, and be a little bit more tough and disciplined. And on the business plan front, I remember what one of our early investors, I hadn't even gone to her as an investment. I just was sort of telling her about my project when I was first taking those baby steps, and the business plan wasn't complete, just the concept side of it, not the number side of it, which was the all-important side. And she basically called me to say, I'm going to be in your inner circle, whatever you call that, circle of investors. And I said, but I haven't even shown you my business plan. And it was an interesting lesson. She said, "Look, I've known you for 20 years. That's what I need to know." And another investor explained that to me. He's someone who's a real estate investor, real estate and private equity. And he said people will be investing, not that the business plan isn't important, I think it's essential, but that people will be investing in you, so they'll be looking at your track record, your expertise, your knowledge and experience, your integrity. So they're really investing, of course, in what's in your business plan, but in you and your trustworthiness and work ethic.
Did you find that, for those of you who have restaurants, that some of your investors were people that you had relationships with?
All.
Interesting.
I love the fundraising process, something I had never done in my life. But it sounds crazy, I loved it. I had so much fun with it. Because I had such a clear picture in my mind. I could see and taste every aspect of my restaurant. I had so developed it in my mind, and then eventually on paper, that going in to tell someone the story of my restaurant I couldn't wait to get it out. And I knew, I'm painfully aware of my weaknesses. I'm not a numbers person, so I have a business partner, although she doesn't work with us today, she's still a business partner, and another person who helped us build the all-important numbers into our business plan. And one of them came with me to every investor meeting, because I wanted to make sure that that these investors knew that these people were on the team, to make sure that our numbers were solid, and that they could help me to answer questions that I might not be expert in. It made me less nervous.
So what did you find was successful when pitching to investors?
Well, this is just this little silly anecdote. I don't know if it actually sealed the deal on any of these things. We use these very impressive looking, they look like anyway, poultry shears to break down our chickens when they come out, or our ducks or guinea fowl or whatever, all the birds that we roast. We have a rotisserie. We use, our chefs and cooks use these very impressive looking poultry shears. They all look a little bit like instruments of torture. I bought several extra pair and would show up at these investor meetings with a pair of poultry shears as a gift. They say, I don't think that sealed the deal, but it's a little thing that
Nice gesture.
I don't know if they will ever have used them, but maybe they're in a kitchen drawer somewhere now.
What about you, John? Any tips for pitching?
For pitching to investors, there's maybe at least one person in this room sitting next to me who's not going to believe this, but I have a little trouble selling myself. Probably both. I have a little trouble selling myself. So when I'm sitting at a table and with our investors, there was only one I knew from previous experience working at Danielle, and I just went through and I tried to be as honest as possible with them, but I probably underplayed what we thought we could do, and I think it's just an element of shyness on that part. You're dealing with somebody else's money, and you're dealing with, hundreds of thousands of dollars that I felt this obligation, like, oh my God, I'm on the hook here. What am I going to do if we lose this money? If we I remember joking with Marcus. I said, I never imagined the Michelin star and the reviews from the Times and all that stuff. I said, I just wanted to not suck. I wanted people to come in and enjoy the food and enjoy this experience and do that. So I did undersell myself with the investors a little bit. And I probably lost a few people before we met the ones who worked on that. And a friend of mine even gave me some advice, and she's, I'm sitting at a table at the beer house with this friend, and I was sitting at a table with a heart surgeon. And he keeps asking me questions about the restaurant, which we hadn't opened yet. He's like, what do you want to do? And tell me all about it. And all I could think was like, this guy's a heart surgeon. Like, what does he care? And I probably didn't take advantage of somebody who was really interested in my business, or the business of hospitality, or, he's a diner only, so he has no idea what goes on behind the scenes. He has no idea how to put together a restaurant business plan, But I was intimidated because of his profession, And historically, I've undersold myself when I've talked to these people. I start to think that the product speaks for itself. Marcus's cooking, the food on the plate, my ability to disarm people as a maitre d'. That doesn't necessarily translate in a meeting, though. So those are things, when we look at the second restaurant, I have to kind of reevaluate within myself, like, how do I sell myself and what we're doing over and above what we've already proven that we can do.
So what will you do differently next time?
I don't know, or radical costume, or do cartwheels.
Bring some poultry shears. I hear that's a good time.
It's a weird balancing act, because you don't want to do it so much that you're overpromising again.
Right.
You want to make sure that the resume speaks for itself, but at the same time you have to, as Georgia, you said, to tell the story of what you're going to be doing. And I wasn't very good at telling the story of what we were going to be doing.
Mm-hmm. I did have one disaster experience, but I think you're fortunate, actually, if you have some very difficult or challenging experience that you can learn from, and if it happens early on, and that serves as a lesson going forward. It was horrible, but I'm grateful to the guy. I mean, a real tough, hard-nosed business person who's immensely successful, and I sort of knew how tough he was. And it's not that I wasn't prepared with being able to answer questions about numbers or my concept. I hate the word concept, but what my restaurant would be. But I went to that meeting on my own. Not saying you shouldn't do that, but in this particular case, I wasn't ready to be. I didn't expect. I wasn't prepared to go into a meeting to be bullied. And he was one of my very early investor meetings. And his first question, this is embarrassing, but I'll say it, almost made me cry. Of course, I did not cry. Huge lump in my throat. No crying. But in any event, his first question was, what the hell makes you think you can do this? But in a really mean, I'm not saying it, I can't say it in the way that this big burly guy said it. That so disarmed me, and of course I collected myself and had my story to tell, and all of the details and colorful taste and flavor of my restaurant to tell him, but I really had to collect myself. So I was very grateful. He proceeded to ask several more specific hard questions, and I'm grateful to this day, and I've told him that he prepared me for every other investor meeting that followed. And thank you. It was great. I also never went to another investor meeting alone. Not that I needed protection, but if ever you do need to sort of gather your thoughts, it's helpful to have another person there to sort of, pipe up while you're gathering yourself. And it was tough, but again, thanks to him, and learned from that big time.
I think there's a key tidbit there that you can use to game the entire process, especially if it's your first time raising money. What I did when I started, because I had never done it before, was I found people that were close to me that I could trust, that I knew that also could be potential investors. They had the money to say yes. And I said, hey, can I practice on you? It was a real pitch. Like, I was really hoping they'd say yes and write me a check there on the spot. And I actually thought that was going to happen. It never did. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to do this whole practice thing, and then they're going to write me a check at the end of it because, of course, my baby is so beautiful. And, I would go in, and they were honest, and they tore me up. And they said, this was just awful. You did a really bad job. Here's what you should do next time. And that was really incredibly helpful, because then you can go back to them once you're a little bit more polished and you've had some practice, and actually give them a real pitch. And hope that they come in as an investor, and then they actually feel even more a part of your process and a partner to you because they helped you and they were a contributor to that growth, which is just a fun dynamic to have with them and a great story if they do say yes. And I thought that was really helpful to actually put myself in a situation where I know someone would let me know how bad I was at this new thing. And you shouldn't be good at it if it's your first time doing it. Which is not how life works.
Right. Well, one takeaway from the guide that I thought was really valuable, Allison, was about how the way you set up your business can actually protect or make the restaurateur vulnerable. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you learned and what you would recommend somebody do when they're starting out.
Yeah, I think the greatest recommendation is hire a great attorney and do it really early on in the process. And I won't go into crazy detail about what Roberta, the attorney that I spoke with, talked about, just because I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to mislead anyone. But your attorney should really be one of the very first people that you have in your kind of cabinet of resources. And business structure, they're going to help you make a lot of decisions and give you a great roadmap for sort of what you need to think of, whether it's right in that moment or down the line or just things you should be anticipating. And making decisions about what your business structure is going to be is one of those really big ones that needs to happen early on. And the basic kind of concept there is that, any contract or any deal that you're going to make with another company or another entity needs to be between your business entity and their business entity. It shouldn't be with you personally, so that you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your assets. And, should something go horribly wrong, you're not losing the roof over your head and every single worldly possession you have. It has to be with a business entity. So I think for most restaurateurs, that's usually an LLC. Roberta, had some really great and interesting insights on other business structures that work really well, specifically for restaurateurs that are looking to open multiple locations of the same concept. And that was basically placing the chef or restaurateur in an S Corp, and then the S Corp is the business entity that starts the LLC for the individual restaurant, and that's what investors invest in. And that is something that protects the intellectual property of the restaurateur. It's explained much better in the guide. And I don't want to get really, really detailed with it just because an attorney is a better person to ask. But the moral of the story is have a lawyer, tell them about your business, and get advice and direction about what business structure makes the most sense for you. It's not going on LegalZoom and just starting an LLC because you're assuming that that's like, the default right thing to do, isn't the best way of going about it. And you're certainly going to need an attorney at many points in the process. And so finding one early and kind of sharing that experience with one person early on is the best way of going about it.
And a great real estate lawyer to review your lease. I know that's obvious, but maybe it's not obvious. I can't tell you how vital it is. Although I went into the process thinking that, your landlord is an adversary. And so reviewing the lease, I was sort of felt this great need for protection at every point and every level, and had a really great real estate lawyer taking us through that process. Turns out that we have an amazing landlord who's the most supportive person. And of course, a smart landlord wants your business to succeed. What's the point of not having it? But I don't know. Your impression in New York City is that is not the case. Whereas I feel so grateful that we have this. And, I was assuming he was going to be, an adversary or not on our side. But it still doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a great real estate attorney who will just, shred your lease or, find all the possible pitfalls. It's probably one of the most valuable things, right? The second lawyer, because they are such specialized areas that it's most likely that the lawyer who is very good at structuring your investor agreement is probably, is certainly not an experienced real estate lawyer. And it's worth the expense of having a real estate lawyer review your lease.
And your operating agreement attorney should be hospitality focused.
Yeah.
So there's literally, for every restaurant, there's an operating agreement that's different. There's no standard, this is a 30% or waterfall payback or all the different variations that you can do to raise money. And having somebody who's really savvy in knowing what other deals and how they've been struck versus like a friend who also happens to be an attorney who may want to help you for half the price, but they've never written an operating agreement for a restaurant. When you're signing a lease and maybe putting yourself as a guarantor on the space and all the possible considerations, like getting a hospitality-focused attorney is crucial, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, throughout this process, I've heard and read so many horror stories about how expensive it can be to design and build out a restaurant, and also causing delays, and then you're not opening when you thought you were being really, and then that affects obviously your bottom line. I guess just what's the best way to actually be realistic about how much money you're going to need and plan that design and build out process up front? John, any takeaways?
I'm actually horrible with money. I'm really good at spending it. And I refer to our controller and our accountant as my editors, because that's what you need. You need a smart accountant to put together how much it's going to cost per square foot.
Right.
You need to do that with a calendar. And we sat down to open Guitar. We had to make some decisions, how to get open. And some of those decisions were, do we put off buying new ovens until we're actually open and use the ones that are in place? And I'm going to go back real quick. A big part of that is, do you need to do a full build out, or are you going into an existing space? And we got lucky, we went into an existing space. So we didn't have to deal with the cost of venting, as an example. Which is a big one. But we did put a few things on the back burner. We got new tabletops, but we didn't get new chairs. We got some new plates, but not all new plates. We inherited some things. But the calendar, along with the budget, thank you, is I think key, because we sat down in early January of 2014 and we started to say, okay, what's a realistic date to open? Because that's going to determine when we're going to start interviewing people and hiring people, which, you start going from construction costs, now you've got payroll costs,
Right.
and there's no revenue coming in. So we put 3 different dates on target, and we talked to our contractor and said, realistically, what can we do? How can we get open? And it ended up being opening not quite as soon as we thought. We were thinking at the end of March. It turned out to be mid-May. So I put off even posting any ads or interviewing until mid-April. And we had a couple of key people in place that we knew were going to be there. A floor maitre d', a sous chef. There was another line cook that came with us. So we kept the payroll really low for the first month. And we didn't get in and start really training people until 2 weeks before we knew we were going to open.
Wow.
And even then, we had one more delay, which was basically 4 days. Serious. It was kind of at that point waiting for some gas to be turned on, and I had a minor. What was one of the questions? There was a whole internet thing. I'm very much an analog guy in a digital world, and I couldn't get the OpenTable online. And then one company's blaming another company, and all I was like, I just want somebody to come in and plug this damn thing in, and have it work. And the Wi-Fi was going down, and I had 2 days of just freaking out. And I'm probably the only guy in this room who's very recently made a mixtape off of a record, and I could not figure out the computer system there. So I finally convinced somebody to come down who knew more than I did, and said, okay, this is what the problem is. So But yeah, we sat with the calendar and we're like, what is realistic? You know, how can we get open? And we put it back a little bit, and we were very smart about when we started interviewing and hiring people. So we knew we had to have a clear opening date for that. You know, people, if you drag on the training, it's, you know, people quit. You know, so that was our experience.
And then there are the curveballs.
Well, what about you, Julia? Did you have an existing space or did you do the full build out?
We did the full build out, which I don't regret it. I'm glad I did it because we have such an incredible. Well, I think I just love our space, and it just seduced me from day one. Even though I knew it would be a challenge to build out a restaurant in a space that hadn't been built out before. But I mentioned previously the partnership of our landlord. There's another restaurant in another part of the building, so he's already accustomed to having what they call a wet tenant, restaurant tenant. He offered to build out to cover the cost of the exhaust build out.
Wow.
Yes, but in any event, that's despite that generosity or that great contribution to our business success. That exhaust system was the curveball in our build out. I don't know. You guys know me pretty well. I'm like not a mean, angry person. I'm just not. I don't know. I've never in my life actually, I think, hated a person or been so angry at a person that I wanted bodily harm to be done to them. But my construction leads to one case in my entire life. I'm sure it won't ever happen again. We actually wanted someone to be in pain. I hate to say it, I don't know if I should admit to that. But the person, there aren't that many companies that build out exhaust systems. It's a pretty specialized thing. And the person, the company building out our exhaust system, it basically went AWOL, disappeared for 3 months. And that held up a lot of other things. We ended up being only 2 months later than we had hoped in our projection, but that was fine. And we had negotiated 8 months free rent. I mean, we drove hard on our negotiation, but that you just couldn't reach the person, and his work had gone far enough along that a specialized construction person wasn't willing to take on and complete what he had already started, and who knows if there were liability issues or whatever they were. We could have ditched him at some point and found someone else to take it on, but every time he would sort of give us a little carrot to make us believe that he was coming back. Like one guy would show up, so we were in this. That was every restaurant. There's no such thing as a seamlessly smooth restaurant construction project that doesn't have some curveball, and of course that's where your contingencies and being overcapitalized,
Right.
helps you. But boy, was that painful. It's kind of receded in my memory now, but it's just all this just brought it back. So I don't regret that we did this full build out in a space that wasn't previously a restaurant. But that was the toughest part of it, and I should have cut bait from that one particular company early on, and there's where being decisive, even if you make the wrong decision at some point, that decisiveness, which is not my forte, probably would have been smarter. Just the guy was ready to just go with some thugs to his office in Brooklyn and find him, but
I would love to see that.
I'm not very intimidating. It wouldn't have helped, but anyway, did finish the job, and there you go. I don't recommend it.
So stepping back a little bit, Allison, I'd love to hear, just after having kind of completed this project, what would be your number one piece of advice for aspiring restaurateurs?
I think remembering that restaurants are relationship-based businesses. Every business is, but I think particularly so in the restaurant industry. And I think a lot of chefs and restaurateurs have actually a really good understanding of that, because you deal with guests every day and you have employees, and those are all, those are the relationships that are the nuts and bolts of your business. But I think sometimes that logic doesn't get applied to the pre-opening process of understanding that your general contractor, your designer, your architect, your attorney, your accountant, all of these people are such critical relationships. They're the people that are going to build your restaurant, and whether they do a great job or a poor job or something in between, you have to live with that for the rest of the life of your restaurant. And so not doing your due diligence and not really taking the time to look at all of your options, to get referrals from other restaurateurs, to not make sure you're always working with a person who has a lot of restaurant experience in whatever their given field is. It's just it's just not worth not doing that in any way. You have to really make sure that you're choosing people that you trust and that you know do great work to come on board and work with you. I think that was the biggest thing.
Anthony, what about you? What do you tell people who are going out on their own?
Be authentic, right? Be true to what you really want to build. There's a ton of risk, not a lot of reward, right? Unless you're maybe 0.01% of professionals that embark to do it. The likelihood is investors are going to be paid back within 5 years, maybe ever, which means with most agreements, usually there's a stipulation where they get paid back first and then you start getting distributions, is one of the most common contracts. So if they're not going to get paid back in 5 years, you may never be able to like start taking distribution from it. You'll always have a salary or a guaranteed payment from your business. And at the end of the day, you know, I think, yes, this is a business. It's probably one of the worst ones to enter to own a business, right? And so it really should be something you really want to do and can see yourself doing for a long time. So make it authentic from the start. Don't compromise on things you really believe in. Surround yourself with the right people. And I think know that, you know, a good point touched on is the relationship building and the vulnerability that comes with that, to admit what you don't know and seek help from people that have done it. Where did you make a mistake in your contract? Where did you make a mistake? What happened with your build out? What happened with your build out? Where did you over budget? Where did you under budget? Like leverage your community to ask them, where did you do wrong? And how do I learn from that? And then learn from it. I think is really, there's 270,000 restaurants in the United States. 70% of them are single owners, which means there's probably 10 million mistakes that were made from those single people who have never done it before. Go out and find out what they did. Where did they get delayed? Where did they spend their money wrong? What would they do differently? You know, most people would never reuse china. At the caliber of restaurant that you opened, like that would not be a thing. If
But
they
what a
walk
waste-
in there and they throw it out. Like,
What a
there's no
waste
way
of
I'm gonna
money.
reuse china. You know? They wouldn't. They would go out and buy it, and then that's, you know, it's another 30 grand right there, which is maybe another week of payroll that you could make it if you don't hit your numbers or you hit a delay. But talking to John about that and knowing that you could open a restaurant like Petard by using other equipment is a reality. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, that's so empowering.
I have the oldest used espresso machine. When some of our construction guys like saw it being delivered, they were like laughing at me. Other restaurant friends in the business who like came in our back of house and saw our machine, but like it works perfectly. It doesn't have bells and whistles, and it's not digital or whatever. I don't even know what digital is, but there's no like digital readout. It works beautifully, and the company who, you know, they come and repair it, whatever it needs, anything. It looks like, you know, it's the ugliest thing on earth, but I didn't need to spend X on a new fancy espresso machine that doesn't make better espresso than this machine. And no one is going to see it. If it were on my bar and I want one of those beautiful brass things, I have 2 rotisserie ovens. One I bought used and for about 20% of the price of the new one. I needed the new fancy one in the front where you can see it. That's kind of the Bentley, and then we've got the Toyota in the back. It's actually the same model and the same make and same manufacturer, but it's used and scruffy and doesn't have the fancy brass trim. But so there are so many ways like that where so don't spend money on the things that will not enhance the guest experience and that are things that are just for your own ego. Ditch that. And
Yeah, that's spot on. It's always ego. 95% of your success is going to be built on the deliciousness of the food and the warmth and sincerity of your staff.
taking care of people.
When you do those 2 things, it doesn't matter what equipment you have in the back. It doesn't matter really like how comfortable the chairs are. We've all been in uncomfortable restaurants that don't have the best linen or the nicest china, and it's just flat out delicious, and the people are really nice, and you go back there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the important stuff.
Well, Georgia, you've been in business now for a little over 2 years?
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
We're going to make it.
If you could go back and tell yourself, you know, right before you open one thing, what would that be?
Tell myself one thing to do differently, do you mean?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. I think I touched on it before, sometimes being decisive, and it takes confidence to be decisive. I wish I had cut bait with that exhaust system builder. You know, when I first saw the signs, if you start to see signs that something isn't working, guess what? It's not working, and it's not going to start working or change or be different. Or like if you start to see signs, and I think that is a theme that I see throughout, and I try to discipline myself, and I'm still learning to practice all the time. So whether it was with that that exhaust building company, it can happen then, say, with an employee. If you start to see signs that that person is not dependable or doesn't perform at the level of standard that is important to your business, some employees you can teach them and give them a little more skills and it can help. But when you see the signs, just know that it's not going to change or be different when you wake up tomorrow. So if it's not working, have the confidence or the decisiveness to stop it, end it, change it, cut bait, move on. And it's something I still, even though I know it's the thing to do, I still struggle with it a little bit. So I'm trying.
John, what about you?
Advice, or if you don't like to repeat yourself on a day-to-day basis, the same thing over and over and over, don't open a restaurant. Or don't have kids either. Which is the same thing. The staff of the restaurant is like having 30 kids. Right?
My former husband used to say repetition makes reputation, but I'm not married anymore. So.
I would say also, don't lose sight of the romantic aspect of it.
Yeah.
You've got the image in your head of, the plates and the camaraderie and the hospitality and the service and, greeting people. And I've really enjoyed over the past 2 years, like, you don't know when you're opening who your regulars are going to be. People who supported you will come down and visit, but you don't know who's going to support you on a regular basis on like a Monday when there's a blizzard, I haven't lost sight of that at all, but it's very much tempered with the reality behind the scenes. Just getting a notice yesterday that New York City is going to be changing some recycling laws. There's some things going into effect in August. It's decidedly unromantic, but it's the reality of the business, and you have to pay attention to that. I've worked with way too many people over my career that they see the glorious side of it. Oh, I get to taste this great wine and this food and all this fun, and they forget that there's real work involved behind it. Sometimes messy work. We had a sprinkler break the day after Valentine's Day over pastry. That stuff coming out of the ceiling is not nice. That's the reality of the situation. You're going to deal with those things sometimes. The other aspect I would say is let go of the word concept. Georgette touched on this in just a second. Concept to me relates to the God particle or time travel or some crap like that. When you're dealing with a restaurant, you're basically handing out plates of nourishment to somebody. That's about what you do. They look at a piece of paper, they tell you what you want, you've presented them with some options, you fill vessels, they consume those vessels, you send back empty vessels, dishwashers wash them, you do it again. You have a room full of people, it could be 28 people, it could be 165 people, and they're all engaging in this, the second most intimate activity you can do with another person, And that's all you're doing, and there's all sorts of different levels along that line. It could be hot dogs, it could be small plates, it could be, the Michelin 3-star. But how you present that is what Anthony said. You've got warm staff and you've got delicious food. So there's a lot of things in there that you might think you want to put into your restaurant, but you can't put it all under one ceiling. So you have to edit yourself. You have to have somebody edit you. The one thing we opened with were these really expensive, really heavy tabletops. And I wish somebody had said, hey, wait a minute, let's look at a different option. Let's shop around a little bit. But we kind of took the first thing we saw,
Because you have to keep moving and keep getting things
Keep
done.
moving, yeah. And I wish somebody had said, hey, here's 3 other options for you, and presented you with like a low end, a high end, and a couple things in the middle. And we just, these look great. Let's do that. And then suddenly it's like $11,000. You're like, what happened to that? And
Do you still have them?
yeah, we still have them. They're heavy as mother. Like you got 2 guys that take them out. Like, at that point, looks trumped functionality.
Yeah.
And I think really good design enables both. And they're just too heavy. I mean, one day we'll get into our 3rd year and we'll maybe look at it and see about replacing them. But right now we're just kind of living with it. They're what they are.
Can I take questions from the group?
Okay.
Any questions from anyone else?
Who's going to break the ice? There you go.
How are you guys? Kat from Aerial Design. So, some tips for restaurateurs wanting to build a restaurant from a construction and design perspective. Talk about contingency. We recommend 20% contingency. It's having owned a restaurant and now building a restaurant. 20% is a healthy budget. Once the owners come in and when you start the restaurant take place, you somewhat kind of get a feel that I may want to hand sync here, I may want to add something here. That's where the 20% contingency comes in. And it helps with your budgeting and your investors when you want to get that money up front. Second is kind of a tip. When you're looking at bids, take at least 3 bids and then do a comparison. So when you compare, you can actually go back to the contractor that you like and start negotiating. For example, contractor A has something cheaper versus contractor B. You really like A. Try to make that tip to kind of make that guy for A at least try to come close to contractor B. That will help you in your budgeting itself. Just want to share that.
Thank you. Did you take different bids from different people? Yeah.
Just getting the process of getting the bids. You're eager and raring to go, and getting the plans out from the architect to through the bidding process with contractors. That's when you're raring to go, and that's taking forever. But yes, no, we bid to 4 different companies, and I've actually like with landlords, you hear such contractor horror stories. I would absolutely use our contractor again, not the guy who built the exhaust system, a different company, but I would use him again and recommend him. There were other people along the way that I wouldn't, but we had 4 bids, and we didn't. I guess it's classic, choose the least expensive one or the most expensive. There were the range was very broad.
Interesting. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Felipe, and I'm trying to do some restaurant consulting. I find that in the business plan process, investors don't really ask a lot about the marketing strategy. And I think that's such an important component in how you guys address that, whether it's through hiring an agency, PR, et cetera, because when you open the doors, we all expect, like our baby, everybody's going to come flooding in. That's just not the case.
Not if they don't know you're there.
So how do you guys address that with investors?
We are actually in the process of addressing that right now. This is something we didn't do before. I don't want to sound like an ass on this, we didn't really have to before. We benefited from the experience of Drew Newport's partnership, or his experience in Tribeca and the 38 restaurants he's opened over the years. Some closed, but his success at Tribeca Grill, his success with Nobu, really translated for us into an anticipated opening. Then we paired it off with Marcus. He was a Michelin-starred chef at the London Hotel. His background and a lot of things sort of generated itself. And now we're kind of in that sophomore year. There's nothing really on the horizon for us. We're no major awards, no major reviews. So now we're actually kind of backtracking and thinking about this. So, maybe we didn't have to 2 years ago, but now we certainly do. And I kind of wish 2 years ago we at least had sort of a structure in going forward, because it can't just be one person like putting pictures on Facebook. It's got to be more of a drive. I don't know if we're at the point where we want to drop $5K a month on a PR agency yet, but we are certainly doing things to keep us at least in the spotlight right now. Like Marcus just did Pebble Beach Food and Wine Festival. He's involved. Danielle's kept him involved in City Mills at Rockefeller Center in June. We do things like that. I don't know how it translates into hard reservations, but it does at least keep us in the spotlight a bit. I don't know. I'd love to hear ideas right now, but
I think that's very common for a new restaurant with a little exposure. It's going to, if you don't get press when you're first opening, then you really have a problem. Then you're just in the wrong place. But I think what John is getting at is that restaurants have a life cycle, no matter how long it may be, that you go from this new restaurant phase, which is good for, depending on your restaurant and the people involved, good for about 1.5 to 2 years, and then you should fully expect that you're going to need to be reaching out to attract exposure for your business, and whether you're going to do it yourself or hire professionals to do it, I think you should just absolutely automatically assume that that is a requirement of your business, whether it's in press outreach, marketing, direct to your customer marketing, events marketing, all the different ways that you can do it. But by year 2 or less, that's essential to your business.
What we're finding is there's not one method which was going to guarantee you another 100 covers a week. It's all incremental. Some of it is reaching out to Tribeca's. We do want to be a neighborhood restaurant. So I don't know if it starts with the hotels and concierge, or if it starts with there's 30-something galleries in Tribeca. I know Citibank has 15,000 employees that are within 2.5 blocks of our restaurant. So we're kind of exploring options right now to build the cover counts incrementally. So it's going to be, because, you know, an extra 10 covers a day with our check average translates to $1,200 a week, which, you know, covers the cost of, in some cases, the tip credit change. It covers the cost of the payroll increase for the front of the house. And we don't want to be the restaurant that starts jacking up prices after all the good reviews. So we want to keep our prices reasonable and a good deal and a good value. But at the same time, how do we figure out where these extra 10 people a day are coming from?
There's a quote that always comes to mind, that it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. And I think that's really indicative also of a marketing or PR strategy. It's relationship building. To think that someone's just going to come in and overnight they've got the contacts in the network to just catapult you is not reality. It's you have them on your team to build relationships where you can't build relationships and keep an eye out. I probably took too long to bring on a team. I didn't do it until November of last year when I opened in July. And for an entirely new concept that has in our industry never really been done before, to think that everybody's just going to get it and understand it and flock was just absolutely absurd. And it took me too long to do it, but when I did it, I saw immediate results. And I continue to see results from it. And, you know, that's one thought, and I had a second thought, and I lost it. We'll let that one go.
Allison, did you find that people you talked to had marketing built into their business plan?
Everybody had a really different approach. I mean, Gavin at Spoon Stable had a marketing and PR firm on board many months before the restaurant opened. Some people don't even touch that and just, you know, do internal things like starting your social media feeds really early and just kind of talking to your neighbors. Georgette was actually the person that I interviewed to do most of the marketing chapter because she is brilliant and was the
I just wish I had the time to execute the ideas that I have.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, pounding the pavement, making sure that the people that are in your direct vicinity know that you're there or you're going to be there, and really doing the grassroots stuff that can be done on your own if you're not going to have somebody else do it.
I remembered it 5 minutes.
Okay.
I think what John was talking about was really important, and especially when you start to see your business, if you have a catapult or if you have slow growth, either way, and after 2 years you'll start to see some level of flatline, right? Or just a lack of the same upward swing that you may have had. And it's really hard at that point to say, I need to put money into this when you become more of a protection mode of preserving money and cash when you see this start to happen. But I think as you look at some of the, some of the kind of new cycles of diner, where I think for the bad we're shifting into a little bit more of the entertainment sector than we are of the experience, nurture, nourishment sector of what restaurants used to provide. And then how many times do you go watch a Broadway play or watch a movie? You know, you watch it once. So after 2 years, regulars in this new dining scene, I think, are a lot harder to build because they're really trying to hit a lot of one-time experiences at the new hot places. And so after 2 years, you're also saying, okay, while we work to build regulars, we need to go back out and get new first-timers to come back in and be relevant, because if you're not in that news cycle, you know, that the new style of diner that is looking at dining as entertainment isn't inclined logically to be a regular, because they're looking at it as a new experience each time, which makes it challenges for businesses that have been open for 2 years.
Oh, no, it's definitely at that. I think that's, as I say, somewhere between that 1.5 to 2.5 year phase where you have to get back out there and not wait to do it, whether it's in relationship building in your community, a lot of the things that we talked about, or the media. Even though you're going to remain true to what your restaurant is, you're not suddenly going to create news by doing some crazy new thing that has nothing to do with what your restaurant is, but you're still doing new things that can generate attention. Not that it's easy.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Hal. I
work in a small business purchasing marketplace, and love to hear a little bit more about some of the challenges and kind of process that you guys went through when you're, purchasing equipment and supplies for your business.
My goodness. Oh, purchasing. So, I mean, there's so many categories of supplies. I mean, like restaurant equipment, small wares, tabletop. Any particular category that you're?
Really equipment, yeah. Large.
I mean, equipment, honestly, aside from a few key items that we purchased directly, well, not necessarily direct, even if you want to purchase it directly, you still probably have to go through a distributor. We chose one equipment company, God, now I have a complete blank on their name, that I had a relationship with based on years of experience of working in other restaurants. I had a relationship with this company, and that was really, where their prices the best. But that was a question of trust and dependability. So we went with that company. But so many other things. I've just sourced, maybe it was, I don't know if it was the most efficient use of my time, but sourced kind of piecemeal because I love the process of researching and finding the things. But no, the big equipment, aside from those items that I bought used, came from, oh gosh, what's Filamico's company called? Sorry, well, it used to be Tessone, but now it's another company. And I actually don't use them anymore because they're not web-based. So yeah, no, then you find once you're operating, you just need to replace items. That's, what I'm saying is old hat to you, but now if you can't buy it online, you're not buying it.
I think just to add to that, you want to find someone that gives you very good after-sales service.
Yes.
You can find anything you want online or at a distributor, but definitely someone who gives you good after-sales.
Right. Well, and the people who provide service for restaurant equipment, and you may have, I'm sure you all may have different inputs on this, but one of the best pieces of advice I got from fellow restaurateurs is, well, you're going to sign a service contract, or you should sign a service contract with a restaurant equipment maintenance company, which we've done. And I've heard different philosophies on it. I was actually speaking to Brett, operations director for Danielle Ballou's restaurant group, and we were talking about the different approaches to this. Do you sign a maintenance contract? You pay a monthly fee for equipment maintenance with one of these companies because one, you're a customer, then they're always at least going to be there when you need them if you're paying them this monthly fee. But the other thing that happens is you're paying them this monthly fee, but inevitably so many of the things you need done aren't covered, and that's painful for someone as frugal. So, that can be painful. So I don't know that I have the exactly right philosophy there or approach. I have gone with the equipment maintenance contract with a service company to come in and do our repairs. But then I'm probably getting a little too nitty gritty, but what happens is when your equipment needs parts, if you're not the sort of person like I who's then they're going to send you an estimate where you need these XYZ parts. 9 out of 10 times I will go online and research the price of the parts myself, which again, is that a good use of my time? I don't know. But I think it's also a learning process. I'm learning more about the equipment and the parts by doing that. So I may not do that for the next 10 years, but now I'm doing it. And I find that inevitably they're charging me so much more than I could pay, than if I were to purchase the parts directly myself online. So I don't know what that tells you. If you're willing to do put in the legwork and do the research, you'll save some money, but not time.
I wish Marcus was here to answer those questions. Most of the money we've spent over the past year has been kitchen related. And one of our investors has known Drew for 30 years is actually a contractor as well. So we have sort of a built-in advantage, if that makes sense. We still shop around a little bit to make sure that he's being fair with us, if that makes sense. But I'd really have to have Marcus come and answer a question like that because I don't, maybe to my detriment, I don't deal too much with the kitchen when they're talking about equipment. I know that the walk-in refrigerator right now is probably something that's going to have to be dealt with in the next year. And
when it goes down, it's going to happen on a Saturday when it's double overtime too. That's just what it's going to be, and you can't not get it fixed on it. No, it does. That just happened a few weekends ago. And you've got to pay the double rate for the service people to come in and do it because you can't not have your walk-in function. And those are the times you just got to grin and bear it.
But that's one of the cases where we're working with the refrigeration company and sort of trying to decide if we're going to do a service contract with them.
Right.
So that's still up in the air right now.
It's still going to cost double on the weekend.
Right, it is. You're right.
I've got that contract. It still costs double on the
It's
weekend.
going to go out on the worst possible time. But,
Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you so much to the panelists for being here. And
Apologies
sharing.
for my voice.